You know, life has a funny way of putting the exact person you need in front of you, not the one you want. The avoidant meets the strong woman not by coincidence but by divine design. It's not a romance at first sight, it's a reckoning, a mirror, a wake-up call from the universe saying, it's time to grow up, it's time to evolve. The avoidant has built walls so high they can't even see the horizon anymore. They've mistaken control for safety, distance for peace. But then she walks in, the woman who cannot be intimidated, cannot be manipulated, cannot be dimmed. She doesn't chase, she doesn't beg, she stands in her power. She is love with boundaries. And suddenly, the avoidant feels something they haven't felt in a long time. Discomfort. That's right. The same discomfort that signals the beginning of change. You see, when an avoidant meets a strong woman, the universe is not punishing them. It's inviting them to heal, to tear down the fortress of fear and step into the battlefield of truth. Because love, real love, isn't about escaping. When you shut down fear and sadness, you also dull joy and connection. The avoidant spends life walking through a muted world, safe but empty. They crave intimacy but fear it at the same time. They long to be seen but panic when someone looks too closely. It's a constant tug-of-war between the desire to connect and the instinct to flee. Avoidance is a strategy of control in a world that once felt uncontrollable. It's a subconscious agreement. If I control how close people get, I can control how much they can hurt me. But control is an illusion. No matter how high the walls are, pain still finds a way in, through loneliness, through regret, through the quiet realization that being untouched also means being unloved. The avoidance life becomes a paradox. They crave what they fear and fear what they crave. When you peel back the layers of avoidance, what you find isn't a cold heart but a terrified one, a heart that was never taught how to feel safe in closeness, a heart that equates vulnerability with danger. And this is where compassion enters the picture. It's easy to judge avoidance as emotional immaturity or disinterest, but avoidance is really an act of self-preservation. It's the body and mind working together to prevent more pain. That doesn't make it healthy, but it does make it human. Fear, in its raw form, is not the enemy. It's a messenger. It's saying, there's something here that still needs healing. The avoidance fear of intimacy is not a rejection of others. It's a rejection of the parts of themselves they've disowned. They don't avoid people. They avoid feelings. They avoid mirrors that might reflect their insecurities back to them. Every time someone gets too close, the alarm system goes off. Danger, too much, back away. But the alarm is old, wired to memories that no longer serve the present moment. True strength doesn't come from running. It comes from standing still in the face of fear and choosing openness anyway. Avoidance may look like control, but it's actually bondage. It keeps the avoidant trapped in cycles of isolation and misunderstanding, repeating the same emotional patterns that once felt like safety but now only breed emptiness. When we begin to see avoidance not as rejection but as fear, everything changes. Compassion replaces judgment, and curiosity replaces frustration. Because fear can be softened. Fear can be reprogrammed. The avoidant can learn that closeness doesn't have to mean loss of control, that love doesn't have to equal pain. But first, they must recognize the truth. What they've called strength was really protection, and protection is just fear wearing armor. When that realization comes, the walls begin to tremble, and for the first time, healing becomes possible. A strong woman is more than confident words and steady posture. She is a mirror, a living reflection of truth. When she steps into the life of someone who avoids intimacy, she doesn't just challenge their habits, she reveals their hidden insecurities, the silent fears that have been buried under years of emotional armor. Her presence is not aggressive, it's magnetic, and that magnetism exposes everything that's been hiding in the shadows. The avoidant, who has survived by controlling distance, suddenly finds themselves standing before a person who cannot be manipulated by withdrawal, who doesn't chase after silence, and who doesn't crumble when affection is withheld. She holds her ground, and in that groundedness, she becomes the mirror that forces the avoidant to see themselves clearly for the first time. Her strength doesn't come from ego or dominance, it comes from deep self-awareness. She has walked through her own fires. She knows what it means to be misunderstood, to love people who are not ready to receive love, to hold space without losing herself in someone else's chaos. That experience has forged her into someone who no longer fears truth, and that's what makes her presence so uncomfortable for the avo. She cannot be fooled by masks. She recognizes avoidance not as confidence, but as fear. She feels the push and pull, the hot and cold behavior, and instead of reacting, she observes. She doesn't plead for attention or validation. She lets the avoidance actions reveal their emotional walls. In her stillness, she teaches. She teaches that love does not need to chase to be powerful. She teaches that boundaries are not barriers, but invitations to meet in authenticity. When she says no, it's not rejection, it's alignment. When she says yes, it's because she means it. And for someone who has lived their life guarding against emotional honesty, that level of integrity is both magnetic and terrifying. The avoidant begins to feel exposed, not because she demands vulnerability, but because her energy requires it. To be in her presence, to truly connect with her, the avoidant must show up as they are, pretending, performing, deflecting. It all falls apart in the face of her unwavering clarity. She is not here to fix or heal him. She is here to remind him of what wholeness looks like. Her strength is not loud, it's consistent. It's the kind of strength that holds space for truth even when it's uncomfortable. When he pulls away, she doesn't chase. She waits, not in passivity, but in peace. When he tests her patience, she responds with calm boundaries instead of chaos. And it's in those moments that the avoidant begins to feel the weight of their own avoidance. For the first time, they see how their walls don't just protect, they isolate. They see how their silence doesn't just shield them, it separates them from real connection. The strong woman becomes the catalyst for self-awareness, not because she lectures or corrects, but because her energy demands alignment. She is the embodiment of emotional maturity, and she invites others into that vibration simply by existing in her truth. When the avoidant tries to play the same old emotional games, distancing, withholding, testing, she doesn't engage. She doesn't collapse into insecurity or resentment. She sees the fear behind the behavior and meets it with compassion, not compliance. That confuses him at first, maybe even frustrates him, because his old patterns no longer work. But slowly, that confusion turns into introspection. He begins to ask himself why her calm unnerves him, why her certainty feels like confrontation, why her love feels different from what he's known. The truth is, the strong woman doesn't weaken for love. She deepens. Her strength comes from alignment with divine principles, self-respect, truth, compassion, and faith. She knows that real love doesn't rescue. It awakens. She doesn't try to change the avoidant. She simply holds up a mirror and says, "This is who you are right now. What are you going to do about it?" That's the power of her reflection. She doesn't demand growth. She inspires it. She doesn't push. She invites. And through that invitation, transformation becomes possible. The avoidant may resist at first, but deep down, they know that what she reflects is real. She shows them what authentic connection looks like. Love without control, affection without fear, truth without punishment. And while that truth may sting, it also liberates. Because the moment the avoidant truly sees themselves through her mirror, the walls start to crack and healing quietly begins. There are no coincidences in the architecture of life. Every encounter, every collision of souls carries a purpose far greater than we can immediately see. When an avoidant meets a strong woman, it is not an accident. It is a divine appointment. The universe arranges these meetings not to comfort us, but to awaken us. It places before us the exact person who will stir the dormant places of our spirit, the parts we've kept hidden or denied. For the avoidant, whose life has been defined by self-protection and distance, meeting a strong woman is like being pulled into spiritual gravity. Her presence disturbs the stillness of his isolation. Her energy exposes the falseness of the safety he's built. It's uncomfortable, but it's sacred. Divine encounters are rarely gentle. They are designed to confront, to expand, to stretch us beyond our self-imposed limits. The avoidant believes they are running the show, that they are in control of their relationships, deciding when to open up and when to disappear. But when they meet someone who is aligned with truth, someone who refuses to play the same emotional hide and seek, The illusion of control begins to crumble. The strong woman's energy doesn't bend to avoidance, it calls it out. She doesn't chase, and that confuses him. She doesn't withdraw in anger, and that disarms him. She simply stands, grounded in her worth. And in doing so, she becomes a divine mirror reflecting everything he's been unwilling to face. This meeting is a spiritual contract, one soul calling another to evolve. The universe orchestrates it to catalyze healing. For the avoidant, it is the beginning of remembering what it means to feel. For the strong woman, it is the opportunity to practice compassion without self-abandonment. Both are invited into growth, though their lessons are different. The avoidant is asked to surrender control, to risk vulnerability, to allow closeness to heal what distance has only numbed. The strong woman is asked to remain strong without hardening, to love without rescuing, to hold space without carrying another's pain. Together, their connection becomes a classroom for the soul. This is how divine timing works. It doesn't align to our comfort, it aligns to our calling. When the universe decides it's time for you to evolve, it won't send ease. It will send a challenge that reveals what still needs healing. The avoidant thinks they can escape this lesson by pulling away, but the truth follows them. The mirror of truth cannot be unseen once it's been reflected. They can run, but the awareness has already been awakened. The encounter has already shifted something deep within. The beauty of this divine meeting is that it strips away illusion. The avoidant can no longer hide behind logic or independence. The strong woman's presence demands emotional honesty. It's as if her very energy whispers, "You can't heal by avoiding. You can only heal by feeling." And in that confrontation, the avoidant faces a choice: retreat back into the familiar loneliness or step forward into transformation. This is the crossroads of destiny, where comfort and growth cannot coexist. What makes this meeting sacred is that both people are instruments in each other's evolution. The strong woman may not understand why she's drawn to someone emotionally unavailable, but her soul does. Her compassion, her strength, her steadiness. It's the medicine the avoidant's heart needs. And his avoidance, his resistance, his fear, it's the mirror that tests the depth of her alignment. Each is teaching the other, each is refining the other. And though the lessons may be painful, they are divinely timed. In every spiritual union, whether lasting or fleeting, the universe is guiding both toward wholeness. The meeting between an avoidant and a strong woman is not a mistake. It's a sacred exchange of energy meant to awaken both souls. It's not about changing the other. It's about revealing oneself. The strong woman reflects truth. The avoidant reflects fear. Together, they are the alchemy of transformation, the dance of shadow and light, resistance and surrender. And through that divine dance, both are invited to rise, to heal, and to remember who they truly are beneath the armor of fear and the illusion of control. Power dynamics shift the moment authenticity enters the room. In relationships built on fear or control, one person often holds emotional leverage. The avoidant maintains distance, dictates the pace of connection, and uses withdrawal as protection. But when they meet a strong woman, the familiar dynamic no longer works. She doesn't chase the affection he withholds, nor does she crumble beneath his silence. Her self-assurance dismantles the balance of power he's used to maintaining. What once felt like dominance now feels like avoidance exposed. The old methods that kept him safe begin to lose their strength in the presence of someone who lives from truth rather than fear. Authenticity disrupts manipulation because it cannot be swayed by emotional games. The strong woman doesn't fight for space in someone's life, she holds space for herself. Her energy operates from alignment, not approval. She's not impressed by mystery or emotional unavailability. Instead, she's drawn to transparency, depth, and mutual respect. This confuses the avoidant, who has long relied on distance as a way to control vulnerability. He realizes that his silence no longer commands attention, it merely creates absence. The power he once believed came from emotional withholding dissolves in the face of her emotional maturity. This shift is not about dominance or submission. It's about truth reclaiming its place over fear. The strong woman embodies a frequency that exposes pretense. She doesn't argue to be understood. She simply expresses herself clearly and calmly, allowing actions to reveal character. In doing so, she forces the avoidant to confront the reality of his own emotional defenses. When someone is no longer willing to play by the old rules, the game ends. Suddenly, he's standing face to face with the part of himself that has used control to avoid connection. Her authenticity dismantles his illusion of power and invites him to step into something far more challenging: emotional honesty. The avoidant begins to feel something he hasn't felt before: accountability. Her strength holds up a mirror to his patterns, and for the first time, he can see how his fear of losing control has actually kept him from experiencing real intimacy. Her energy is not controlling or demanding, it's steady and self-contained. That steadiness removes his ability to dominate through unpredictability. When she doesn't react to withdrawal with desperation, when she meets manipulation with boundaries instead of compliance, she takes back the power that avoidance once held. This is where the transformation begins. The avoidant, accustomed to being emotionally pursued, must now confront the truth of his own avoidance. The dynamic shifts from one person trying to prove their worth to both being invited into authenticity. The strong woman's boundaries teach the avoidant that love doesn't mean control, it means respect. It means showing up fully, not just when it's convenient. She won't fight for half presence. Her self-respect is non-negotiable, and that non-negotiable standard shakes the foundation of his old emotional strategies. In this sacred tension, both individuals have a choice: regress or evolve. The avoidant can double down on control, withdrawing further into fear, or he can surrender to the discomfort of vulnerability. The strong woman, too, must choose whether to stand in truth or shrink to make him comfortable. The power dynamic shifts again when she refuses to shrink. Her quiet strength becomes the force that calls him to rise, not by demanding it, but by embodying it. True power in any relationship isn't about who has control. It's about who lives in alignment with truth. The avoidant learns that emotional safety doesn't come from distance, but from integrity. The strong woman demonstrates that power doesn't need to dominate, it needs to flow. When both step into authenticity, the energy between them changes. The struggle for control gives way to mutual respect. The avoidance that once kept love at bay transforms into awareness, and awareness becomes the foundation for connection. The dynamic that began as a battle between fear and strength evolves into a partnership of honesty and growth. The avoidant's need to control fades as he begins to understand that vulnerability is not weakness. It's the purest form of power. And the strong woman, by staying true to herself, becomes not a conqueror, but a catalyst. Together, they redefine what power means, not as dominance, but as shared presence, where both can stand in truth without fear. Healing does not come through resistance. For the avoidant, avoidance has long been a strategy for survival. Every withdrawal, every deflection, every carefully measured silence was meant to keep pain at bay. The world, at some point, taught them that vulnerability equals danger, and so they learned to protect themselves by keeping intimacy at arm's length. But protection is not the same as healing. The very walls that once kept them safe also kept them trapped in cycles of loneliness, misunderstanding, and unfulfilled longing. Real transformation begins the moment the avoidant realizes that avoidance cannot solve what avoidance created. Awareness is the doorway to growth. When the avoidant begins to observe their own patterns without judgment, without excuses, they start to see the cost of their fear. They notice the relationships left incomplete, the opportunities for connection they let slip away, and the subtle but persistent ache of isolation. Avoidance might have shielded them from immediate pain, but it has also stunted emotional expansion. To heal, they must face what they have long evaded: emotions, attachment, fear, and desire. They must learn that being present with discomfort is far more transformative than hiding from it. Healing asks for courage. It asks the avoidant to step into the very feelings they have been taught to fear. Fear of rejection, fear of dependency, fear of exposure. These are not signs that avoidance is necessary. They are signals that growth is ready. Resistance keeps one in the familiar prison of self-protection. Acceptance, on the other hand, opens the doors to connection. By choosing to feel rather than flee, the avoidant begins the slow, steady process of reintegration with themselves. They learn that emotions, even difficult ones, are not enemies, but guides. They are the language of the soul, insisting that life is meant to be experienced fully, not avoided. The presence of a strong woman intensifies this journey because she embodies consistency, clarity, and emotional maturity. She doesn't react to avoidance with anger or pleading. Instead, she reflects calm boundaries and self-respect. This reflection forces the avoidant to confront their own defenses. They cannot manipulate her with withdrawal, nor can they control her affection through distance. Her presence becomes a mirror, showing what avoidance truly does. It isolates, it misleads, and it prevents the very connection that the heart secretly craves. Facing this mirror requires honesty, and honesty is the first step toward healing. Healing is not linear. It is a dance between progress and relapse, courage and retreat. The avoidant will resist at first, perhaps unconsciously, because fear has been a trusted companion for so long. But each moment of awareness chips away at the old patterns. Each time they choose to engage rather than escape, they strengthen the muscle of presence. They learn that intimacy does not demand surrender of self, but instead invites deeper integration of self. They begin to see that vulnerability, far from being weakness, is the pathway to freedom. Compassion becomes essential. Healing cannot happen without self-compassion. The avoidant must forgive themselves for past avoidance, for the walls they built, and for the ways they pushed others away. This forgiveness is not denial, it is acknowledgement. It is saying, I understand why I did what I did, and I am ready to do something different. Through compassion, fear loses its grip. Through awareness, the old patterns become visible and manageable. When avoidance meets awareness, a transformation begins. Resistance fades, and the heart gradually opens. Emotional walls crumble not because they are forced down, but because their purpose is no longer needed. The avoidant discovers that connection is not danger, but nourishment, that love is not entrapment, but freedom, and that true healing is never found in hiding, but in courageously facing what one has long avoided. The process is gradual, patient, and sacred. Each step toward emotional honesty, each moment of presence is a reclamation of life itself. The avoidant begins to understand that avoidance was a strategy of survival, but healing is a strategy of thriving. It is in this surrender to awareness, in this choice to feel, that the avoidant finally discovers the depth of connection they have long yearned for and the strength they have always possessed. Transformation is not a gift, it is a choice. When an avoidant meets a strong woman, the potential for profound growth emerges, but it does not happen automatically. The meeting itself is powerful, but the real change occurs when the avoidant decides to step into the discomfort, to face the fear, and to engage with life in a way that has previously felt impossible. Transformation demands courage because it requires breaking lifelong patterns, questioning deeply held beliefs, and confronting the shadow of one's own avoidance. The strong woman does not impose change, she embodies it. She shows, by her very presence, that another way of being is possible, one rooted in integrity, openness, and aligned strength. The avoidant is often caught in a cycle of emotional push and pull, moving between desire for intimacy and instinct to flee. This oscillation feels familiar because it has been reinforced by years of survival mechanisms. But when faced with someone who is unwavering in her authenticity, the avoidant begins to see the futility of old patterns. Withdrawal no longer grants safety, control no longer ensures stability, and emotional avoidance no longer produces peace. Transformation begins when the avoidant recognizes that the old strategies, which once seemed protective, are now obstacles to the life and love they truly crave. Growth demands self-reflection. The avoidant must learn to ask themselves difficult questions. Why do I fear closeness? What am I truly protecting myself from? What part of me has never felt safe in vulnerability? This is not easy work. It challenges the ego, confronts the past, and exposes insecurities that have been carefully hidden. But it is only through this deep inquiry that authentic change becomes possible. The strong woman, through her unwavering clarity and emotional maturity, acts as a catalyst. She does not give answers. She holds a space where the avoidant can confront their inner truth. Her consistency allows him to recognize that emotional safety does not have to come from avoidance, but from alignment with one's own integrity. Transformation also requires persistence. Change is not a single decision or moment. It is a continuous practice of choosing presence over flight, vulnerability over detachment, and honesty over avoidance. Each moment, the avoidant engages, choosing to communicate instead of withdrawing, to trust instead of fearing, to feel instead of numbing, is a brick in the foundation of their new emotional reality. The strong woman, by embodying steadfastness and alignment, offers the container in which these bricks can be laid. She demonstrates that growth is possible not through manipulation or pressure, but through example and consistency. Healing and transformation are intertwined. As the avoidant begins to face their fears and step into connection, they discover layers of themselves that have long been hidden. They learn that vulnerability is not weakness, but strength. They recognize that love is not a trap, but a catalyst for expansion. Each step forward dismantles old beliefs, reshapes emotional patterns, and rewires the nervous system to accept closeness without panic. Over time, avoidance loses its grip, replaced by awareness, presence, and emotional fluidity. Spiritual principles are woven into this process. Transformation is guided by alignment with truth, integrity, and self-respect. The avoidant is learning to honor themselves while honoring the connection. They are learning that power does not come from control, but from authenticity, that safety does not come from walls, but from emotional resilience, that freedom is not in escape, but in presence. The strong woman reflects these principles in her energy, showing that a life grounded in truth is a life capable of love, joy, and growth. The culmination of this transformation is not perfection, it is presence. The avoidant may still feel fear, but fear no longer dictates behavior. Vulnerability may still be uncomfortable, but it no longer triggers flight. Emotional intimacy may still challenge them, but it now offers opportunity rather than threat. The transformation is both subtle and profound. A shift from avoidance to engagement, from fear to courage, from survival to thriving. The strong woman has not fixed him, she has held space, reflected truth, and inspired the courage to choose growth. In that sacred interplay, both are elevated, and what was once avoidance becomes a doorway to awakening, connection, and lasting transformation. In the dance between avoidance and strength, we witness the extraordinary power of presence, courage, and truth. How one soul can awaken another, how boundaries become bridges, and how vulnerability transforms fear into freedom. When an avoidant meets a strong woman, it is not just a meeting of hearts, but a sacred invitation to growth, healing, and authentic connection. Let us carry this wisdom into our own lives, honoring the mirrors, the challenges, and the love that guide us toward wholeness. Thank you for opening your hearts and minds to this journey of transformation. May it inspire courage, presence, and the profound beauty of living fully.